I'll introduce myself, and Liz will tell you more about herself, and we'll be able to get started here. So I am Ben Pendarvis, like I said, and I'm a former teacher, over 10 years of experience in various education settings in the classroom and beyond. Most recently was teaching in a wall-to-wall PBL school that used competency-based assessments at Tri-County Early College High School in Murphy, North Carolina. I have a master's in experiential education, which is basically learning the theory and the practices behind project-based learning, service learning, place-based learning, all of those based learnings that we have out there now. And so I will be moderating the discussion today as much as I need to, making sure that we are giving enough time to everybody and everybody is getting a chance to speak their truth. Liz?
Yeah, I'm Liz Beck. I'm a coach with Constructive Learning Design. I'm an App State teaching fellow and former high school English teacher, and a huge fan and user of alternative forms of grading. So I'm pretty excited to be here. My job today is to run slides, the chat window, the links, and also see your faces on a very tiny screen. So, bear with me if there's a little tech snafu, but I think we'll be okay. Ben, you're up.
All right. So before we start with the questions, we're just going to review some norms and ground rules. These are also the norms that we use in our community of practice, which will be housed on an online platform, and it will be coming soon. The norms are for everybody, and if you are here as audience, then the ground rules are for you, mainly in terms of keeping your mics muted, making sure that you are sharing your questions and comments and thoughts about what folks are saying, and interacting through the chat window, and we'll make sure that we can elevate in those as applicable. And we will do our best to make sure that the organizations and resources that you are mentioning and discussing are also potentially shared with you as we can. But thank you again for being with us. We're gonna get started with our questions. So we'll leave this slide up as we go. These are the questions for better measures for learning that you see up at the top there. The questions that also frames the resources that we have in our online platform to come. And so we want to ask you these same questions. We also want to ask eventually other school leaders and systems level folks these same questions and see how they differ and where they overlap. But I'm going to leave them up on the slide here because what I want to do is I want to moderate as much as I need to. So I will start us out and I will jump in here and there to direct or to redirect or to follow up. But ideally, I would love it if you guys took it forward, and as we start, that you guys build off of each other, that you take a look at the questions there and consider where you relate most in terms of adding your thoughts. And so if you do switch a question that you're referring to, just make sure that you let us know that you're switching over and what question that you're going to be responding to. But certainly feel free to not be prompted to answer. So we'd like this for as much of it to be a free-flowing conversation between teachers and practitioners as we can. Let me just double check real quick before we get started. Will there be any other folks or potentially students joining us today? Okay, I just wanted to make sure. And that is fine. So let's get started. So I'm going to start off with that first question. What do you measure with your students? And that second one that follows it is also important. It doesn't have to be something that you formally do right now, but you might tell us about what you want to measure, or you might measure informally, say, in the back of your mind as you meet students and go through your day, but doesn't end up on a document somewhere. So what are the things that you hope to measure with your students or that you already do?
When my students come into my class, when they sit down, they do a do now, which measures from the very beginning of class kind of where they are for the day. They give me kind of an SEL response based on their weather check for the day. And that allows us to kind of set some goals based on where they are individually. And from there on, I essentially measure all of their productivity and activity in class in terms of whether or not they've mastered something, whether or not they're in revising mode for something. And what I'm really looking for with all of those is growth. I teach English dual enrollment classes to high school students. So we're constantly looking for them moving towards a collegial level of writing. And so measuring that growth across the spectrum, and also measuring kind of just their growth as individuals and becoming better students, and how their executive functioning skills can be improved. We measure that as well.
Great.
Here at Beck, we've taken a school-wide approach, and we look at 3 different areas to measure our students' learning. We have focused on mindset, skill sets, and tool sets. So mindsets for our students are those interpersonal skill sets like growth mindset, which Lindsay focuses on, adaptability, inclusiveness, resilience, sticking with something, and we know those develop over time. Our skill sets are based off of the core content from the state, and then core skills that we have in the courses that are unique to NEET. So those would be like our standards. And then our last facet would be our tool sets, and our tool sets relate directly to the real world of work. So project management, communication, collaboration, teamwork. So we have 3 huge areas of focus for our school, and it's measured constantly. And the students know what's being measured. We've had student panels review them, parent panels review them, our business partners review them, and then those rubrics are placed into Canvas. And so everything that they submit in our middle grades right now has a rubric tied to it. Our coaches, we call our teachers coaches, go over that rubric with them, and they know ahead of time what they're being assessed on when they turn in their artifacts.
Very cool.
So Ocean and I teach at Madison High School with Megan, and we're both biology people. And I'm a weird amalgam of Megan and Ocean because I do the dual enrollment college classes for high school students as well, and Ocean is doing the high school biology. So I want her to talk about the learning targets and what we measure in biology. And I just want to say, like, what do you want to measure or measure informally? So I do the daily do nows with Megan, and if there was some way to measure my relationship with students, like if there was a scale that I could put that on, I would love for that to happen. Those daily do nows, every day it's just a question. Like today's question was, how do you respond to change? Do you dread it or do you love it? And just the conversations that I have with the kids on those daily questions, they are so eye-opening. And I don't feel like I have ever had relationships with my students like I'm having now. And it's not anything that we're doing formally in class. It's very informal, but I can look around at my students and say, I know who you are, at least better than I did before I was doing the daily do nows. So that is definitely one thing that I am really excited to be measuring, so-called, measuring at this point. But then Ocean can tell you all about learning targets and how we work those into our science classes.
Yes, so I do the SEL type strategies with the students as well. And, it does help us get to know the students in an informal way. But the sciences have taken the science curriculum that the state gave us, and we've made learning targets, the I can type statements, and we assess the students based solely on those learning targets. It's very intentional. So when we ask a question, it's to really give us feedback. Does the student know this at a mastery level, or are they okay with it? Maybe need some tweaking, or did this person just not know it at all? So whenever the students take those assessments, it gives us an idea, you know, how well they learn the material. And like all the labs and activities that we do leading up to the learning target assessment. We also give them the flexibility to determine how they want to be tested. So if they want to draw like a picture, a graphic organizer, if they want to write an essay to express their knowledge on the learning target, we give them that option to do whatever kind of method of testing that fits their ability. I gave an oral exam to one of my students the other day, and just by, you know, talking about the learning target, having that conversation, that back and forth, I know that that student has that learning target nailed about 90%, because she missed like one little piece, but after we, you know, I kind of hinted around, or we talked around about, she was able to pick up on it. So that gives me a very a really good indication how well the students know, and it's very individualized. So it relies on their strength of being assessed rather than conforming to the normal, you know, standardized type testing. That's multiple choice, or as students say, multiple guess, you know. So it kind of helps them make sure that they really know the material, because that's what we are really wanting, is to see if they know the material. Is that about right, Chief?
Yep, that's about right. I would just add, Megan and Ocean and I are all really big on revision as well. We don't believe it's one and done. We believe that true learning happens when you look at your work and you say, huh, I could have done this better, so let me try again. So even with those learning target assessments that Ms. Wallen's talking about, there are opportunities for revision there. We've done it several ways. We've done it, you can revise all the way up through the end of the 9 weeks, or we've done like more 2-week windows where you have time to revise. But revision is super important for all of us.
Leslie, I wanted to touch briefly too. You mentioned if you can measure the relationships you have with students and that sort of thing. So one of the things we've done this year is to implement a design thinking style PLC cycle. And one of those measures that we reflect on and that we get student input around is empathy. So I'll let Lindsay share a little bit more about what that looks like in terms of data, but we've started to humbly try to measure some of that.
So our kids go through a 3-week cycle of something called flight time, which could be acceleration, could be remediation, could be study skills, organization skills, whatever they personally need, and they are grouped accordingly. And so every week the coaches get together and they have tracked that data about either academically what they've been successful at or what they still need to work on, but they also track their empathy data. So how do you feel about being in this group? How is your coach helping you? And they talk about, like, did this activity help you better understand the concept? And then if it didn't, the coach is able to fix that for the next week so that they can meet that student where they are. And so they can start to see that success in those standards that Karen was talking about through our skill sets, mindsets, and tool sets. And so our teachers track that empathy data each week and bring that to the table at all of our PLCs. And so that data can go from a Google form exit ticket out the door. It could be an emoji exit ticket that some of them have done that I sent them this week, where the kid just colors or circles where they are, especially for our 5th and 6th graders, and how they're feeling. So collecting that data is helping a lot of our coaches see the value in changing up assessments, and how you were talking about the student might not want to write an essay, maybe they want to tell you in person how the standard is met for them. And so our coaches are really starting to see that.
And so what we've done overall, if you can imagine trying to measure development vertically for project management skills and those sorts of things, is and especially through varied assessments. We're a PBL school. We do a lot of authentic learning. And so, how are you using every opportunity to assess and record that data in a way that you can really use it to inform decision making? And so we spent time over the past 2 years to develop rubrics for all of our courses, 5th grade through 12th grade, aligned to those standard courses of study. So we've spent a lot of time with levels of learning, how we're thinking skills to really pin down, or at least the starting point of what progressing, meeting, and exceeding a particular standard would look like for every standard. And then we use Canvas as an intermediate to sort of map back through that rubric every assessment we do. So whether it's a component of a PBL, it's a presentation, it's a quiz, whatever, those are mapped back to standards. And from there, and that's for mindset, skill sets, and tool sets, even some of the empathy data that Lindsay was sharing. And so from there, we've been working with UNC Greensboro Serve Center to develop data dashboards from that, so that we can really draw usable information from that. So there's this layer of analysis that's sort of done. So from there, we can cross group, we can vertically get together to look at standards, that common themes across grade levels that we may want to focus specific programs on to improve student learning. I'll let Karen share a little more about that, but it's been it's like next level.
I think I use the term revolutionary when I talk about it, because it really excites us here. We are a smaller school, so we only have one math teacher per grade level, maybe 2 at the high school. And so we were kind of missing those sages and ideas bouncing off of each other, because that we have a really strong teaming. We are a team of teams here. So being able to take the data that we can pull from EVOS and end of assessment data and Canvas with our rubrics and our standards-based grading and put them on a dashboard really helps. The PLC process sometimes is labor intensive when you're working with a spreadsheet and you're trying to move kids in different tiers, but by taking all of our data and putting it on a dashboard, that we can prep the PLC before they go. When they hit the PLC, they're sharing what they're seeing in their data. They start that design thinking process of creating ideas. They look at what they used to teach it before, and then they say, okay, if that didn't work or that worked too well, now they need to be accelerated. How can we apply that to different standards? Or if it didn't work great, what did the kids say? What is our data telling us? And how do we change? And so really getting into that test, collect data, each week has been really powerful for us. So the empathy data has made a change. That was really hard for our coaches, some to grasp, about really going back to the kids and taking, what the kids are saying about, hey, I really like this activity and I really hated this one, and this is why. So just, making sure that they're honing in on that with our data dashboards has helped us make a lot of instructional changes.
I love what all of that sounds so amazing. I do kind of a smaller scale version of that, and I think Leslie and Ocean probably do too. At the end of every unit, I have like a check-in that's just like a Google form, and the kid just says, it's more self-reflective. Did you ball out, or was this like a really awful unit for you? What was your main takeaway? If you could go back and redo anything, what would you do? How did you support another classmate throughout this unit? And it just kind of forces them to really think about not only what they did throughout the unit, but how they interact with other people and how they could have supported other people's learning, and kind of go to that next level of being a college student, if we are pushing them there. So I think all of that stuff, I'm taking notes from what you guys are saying. I think that all sounds really awesome.
I love the term empathy data. I've never heard that before, so that's awesome. And just to kind of piggyback on what Megan was saying, it amazes me how, you think of high school teenagers as not really being dialed in to their inner feelings and thoughts, but they are. But what's the stumbling block, I think, is like they know what their problems are, but they don't quite know how to fix them. Like in the last unit, my reflection question was like, I can't remember exactly how it was worded, but it was like, what's getting in your way kind of thing? What's keeping you from being as successful as you want to be? And so many of mine said, I am a terrible procrastinator. So they recognize that that is an issue for them. But then today in class, I had 2 boys, and my class is very much at self-paced. So you work or you don't work, that's up to you. And I had 2 boys who decided that they wanted to look at Israel on Google Earth today during their lab time. And I was like, boys, remember that reflection you filled out where you said you were terrible procrastinators? Guess what's happening right now? And they were like, yep. But did they do anything to fix it? No. So I don't know. We're still working on that, but it's cool that they recognize it.
I really liked what a lot of y'all said, and some of what I'm trying to do and we're trying to do at the early college, Tri-County Early College is similar. We use a lot of depth of knowledge. So in math class, I'm looking for depth of knowledge in terms of where are you, and we use learning targets as well that we've drawn out from the state standards. And then as a school, we're also assessing survival skills, which sound like they align with some of the skill set, tool set that y'all are talking about. They're based on Tony Wagner's work. But one of the things, that question of who measures it, I've really emphasized this year, and I'm doing this through a Google Sheet, is that students are self-assessing where they are, and then I'm looking at their work and I'm assessing their work, and then the way this shows up on their mastery tracker or their Google Sheet, it facilitates this conversation. So if the student thinks they're at mastery and I think they're at near mastery or emerging mastery, we know that we need to have a conversation about, tell me why you think, explain, prove to me why you're at mastery. Or if I think they're at mastery and they think they're at emerging mastery, then I can say, look at this work that you submitted. Let's talk about this explanation you had, or this project you completed that really shows a deeper level of knowledge than you see for yourself. So really trying to emphasize that the students are engaged in measuring their own progress, and then having those conversations about that progress.
So I don't know how many of y'all, what your learning management system is, but we use Canvas here, and Canvas has a peer rubric feedback on it. So the rubrics that our coaches use, the kids, you can turn it on in Canvas and assign either anonymous students or students know which kids' work they're working on. So they can actually use, like you said, which is a great practice, the rubric that they're going to be for their final assessment, and they get that feedback. And then what Lindsay and I encourage the coaches to do is to turn around, and when they submit it, that the kids use the rubric and then explain what feedback from their peers that they had used and how they changed it to make it better before they turned it in. And so that's been very helpful of being able to assign peer feedback, having much higher quality work when it comes in that second time. And then our kids, before they get into it, have really worked with that rubric 2 times to see exactly what their work is reflecting against our mindset, skill sets, and tool sets. And I think probably when I'm looking down these 3 questions, I think where we are right now is the last question with how do you measure your students' learning. We're calibrating rubrics on our Fridays. We do a 3-week cycle, and we're gathering data on, do the rubrics match the standards and what standards we've set? Do the assignments clearly match the rubrics? Do we have extraneous information turned in with the assignment? Is it right on target? Is it not a strong measurement? And then we're calibrating how well we use the rubric to assess. Were you too lenient, too hard? and then the level of comments that we have. So I think that last question about the difference between formative and summative, I think we see, some common problems with standards-based grading here. They want to grade everything, and it's not about the grade and completion. You really can't use the rubrics that we set up for completion. It is generally, if they're doing a skill set, what they know. It has nothing to do with if it was late, has not, that's on a tool set rubric. It has nothing to do with if it was pretty, that, can fall on a different rubric. So when we really drill down, because we separated it into 3 areas, with the skill sets, we can confidently say what the kids know. And so we're having a great discussion right now about when to use a formative assessment. Every check shouldn't be a learning mastery check. You have to give the time, the kids time to gain the knowledge, use the knowledge, and practice with it, and then really move into that summative kind of assessment where you would have a learning mastery check. So I think it's some of the things we've kind of learned on the way is, one, if you do not know your standards inside and out, standards-based grading is going to be really hard, because a lot of times we have, coaches new to NEAT, they're not doing the verb like, we talked about before, the depth of knowledge. They're teaching the vocab, but not the level of the verb. Are we analyzing it? Are we comparing and contrasting it? And then just really paying attention to giving the kids some practice, which Canvas allows us to use the rubrics and check. This is not a learning mastery check, so they can see that rubric at the beginning stages of learning, and then really pay attention to when we're doing that mastery check. We don't want to do a mastery check too soon and discourage the kids. We want some time for them to build their confidence in learning that skill. And I think that's where we are kind of right now, is when's formative the right choice, when summative the right choice, and then making sure that the kids understand what they need to do to improve their mastery. Like the other school just said, they can improve their mastery at any time. But we have ours set up on a different scale. We have a decaying average. So the last mastery check that they do is 65%, and then all the other attempts are that lower category. So when our coaches got together and talked about how we were going to do learning mastery checks, we ran through all the options. Do we want it the highest, the latest, the average? And they really felt like that decaying average really helps students, because it counts every single attempt. But when you do that last attempt where you demonstrate your most knowledge, that's where it's going to pull the highest level of learning.
Wow, this is really powerful stuff. I want to just jump in right now, because we're starting to see some level of differentiation in the responses. I want to kind of touch on that and see if we can pivot with it. And so you guys have mentioned, you've kind of got into the how as well. Of course, that goes hand in hand with the what. And you've mentioned a couple of different LMSs or tools that you use to do that. I'd love to bring Dave in, and I wonder if Dave, you could speak to the tools that you guys use and how you assess your students, and maybe we can start a conversation thread around that. What tools and resources are you using to enhance that assessment experience?
Sure. The tools that we've developed as a district include rubrics, and the rubrics aren't just by grade level. They're banded by chunks of grade levels, and there's definite vertical alignment that has been vetted so that we see a progression when we talk about, I'm a science teacher, so we talk about science skills from kindergarten through 12th. There's definitely a vertical progression in our rubrics that we use district-wide, and the language is very similar, but the expectations clearly, the rigor goes up from grade level to grade level. So that's kind of one side of the student that we measure, those science skills or content skills in various content. But then the other side of it is we use the term 21st century skills to describe some of those. I think you were using terms like mindset or tool sets. We use 21st century skills, and we have the same rubrics designed to go K-12 as a progression to measure students' ability there. And we communicate that out to our parents and a standards-based report card. So in the standards-based report card, they'll see both science, math, the different content area, the student performance on those particular skills, but then they'll also see student performance on 21st century skills. And those 21st century skill sort of buckets are filled by all the content areas together to give a broad picture of what the student's skill set is beyond the content areas throughout all the different courses that the student is taking. That standards-based report card exists at our elementary schools and our middle schools, but it does not exist at our high school yet. And that's a conversation that we're currently engaged in, is how do we communicate that information at the high school level, because we're not like a project-based high school per se. That we're just what would be considered a traditional high school. So the question is, how do we communicate that information outward, but still have our transcript be viewable by colleges? That's what our community is concerned about. If we're going to communicate those things, how do we still communicate the things that the colleges want to see? So the resources that we have available that we use is PowerSchool. We don't have Campus. PowerSchool is our tool, and it allows us to check for each assignment what standards are associated with it, and it builds over time. We can print out reports. We have motion sensors, so that's why I just went dark, because we're trying to save energy here. Well, you can hopefully still see me. But our PowerSchool allows us to generate reports for our students so that they can see their performance on standards, set goals based on those standards, and track their progress over time. So, Ben, I hope I answered your question.
Oh, yes, definitely. Thank you.
Sure.
So Dave brings up a really interesting point about the different ways we communicate our grading, right? And so if any of you want to speak to that as well, in addition to the kind of resources or the LMS that you've been able to establish, that would be great.
I would like to sort of add a little bit about what we're doing here. We're using, currently today, we were actually working on it with the EVOS data. And we've got our projections of what the students are going to be doing. And the science department, we worked pretty closely as a team. We are taking the biology students and trying to fit them into different categories and start emphasizing, like, how are they going to be able to be successful in biology? How can they learn? And this is what the data is showing us, for their projection. I don't want to rely heavily on, focusing on the EOC for biology, but the data does give me an indication on how, any kind of background information about their learning. If they are projected to not really do well on the EVOS, then that means that they probably are struggling in the classroom learning the materials. So that helps me target or focus my attention on them in a certain way. And I might need to strategize more with the vocabulary. We're working with the English department, working on morphemes and trying to make connections with the words. So if they know, the root word, the prefixes, stuff like that, that gives them a really good idea of what the vocab word is about. So, we use those kind of strategies. We use everything that we can to try to give us the ability to teach the kids the best way for them as an individual.
A really simple tool that I've implemented in my class is a progress tracker. And all of my kids' units have a definitive start and end date, but they're self-paced within that timeline. So as long as they have everything wrapped up by the end of that unit, they're good to go. They can also collaborate on anything other than a mastery check. So the progress tracker is really good. I mean, they come in every day and they want to see it and they want to see it updated. And they're like, why did this? Why is it not updated? So it's really important to them, but it also allows for them to see other people who they could collaborate with. And it lets me kind of keep a really good structure in terms of, back to that executive functioning stuff, them working through and staying on track and kind of holding them accountable. And I share that with parents. So they can kind of keep track of where their student is in terms of the unit as well. But it's really simple. It's simple for me to update. It's simple for them to see. And it kind of just keeps, I think that's like the controlling factor in my classrooms, if I had to pinpoint a really simple tool that I've implemented.
Megan, is there a particular name for that tool, or is it something you developed?
So I'm using, the model that I'm using is from the Modern Classroom Project. I don't know if you guys have heard of it. It is transformative. I would like scream it from every rooftop if I could. But it's just a Google sheet that has all of the unit lessons and just the must do, should do, and aspire to do, and kind of whether they've mastered it, whether they're in revising mode. And they love it and I love it. So it's working.
Yeah, I'll second that. I stole the progress tracker from Megan. I freely admit that. But the cool thing about it is it's color coded. I think Megan does hers that way too. So the kids, they're so funny because if they're revising, it's orange. If they haven't done it at all, it's white. And if they're done, it's green. And so like I'll come in and I'll put progress tracker up at the beginning of the day. And I'll say, all right, y'all, look at all this white. This is not good. And then they'll be like, oh, okay, we gotta turn green. And so they are super concerned about getting to green. So just the fact that it's simple and quick and easy to look at with your colors, you can see where you are. That's a real plus for that.
Yes, great. I want to jump in because we will take a few more minutes before we wrap up, but I really want to make sure that we have the chance to add our thoughts on this last question, which we haven't really gotten to yet. So we all seem to have a lot of overlap, some personalized, student-centered methods that we're using, and measuring a lot of the same kinds of things outside of academics, separating behaviors and things like that. So why do you do that? Who told you to do that? No, why do you do it? And is that experience validating your why? So tell us more about you and or your school's kind of philosophy there.
I'd say for me, I do that because I want students to learn. And I think that emphasis on student learning is really the why, because, you know, I've seen it from different angles, and I see that thinking creatively about measuring progress and how they do it, you know, that's where real learning happens. And you know, students, you know, it's a challenge. It's different. Most of our students are coming from a different kind of measure, and I'm teaching ninth graders, and so they're going through that, you know, and kind of wondering about it. But as I start to see them value learning and recognize it, I mean, that's why I'm doing it, to see them really truly learn and be able to talk about what they're learning.
So the reason why I'm doing it, and it's pretty simple, it's to increase scientific literacy. I want our kids to have every opportunity that's possible for them. We're in a rural county. The percent of students going to further their education or getting a career rather than a job, you know, it's kind of low. So I want our students to learn, and I want them to have scientific literacy. You know, so much stuff is going on in this world that if the students had a little bit of that scientific literacy background, I think that they would be able to make pretty good choices. And then it also just sort of helps. I mean, I have, real quick story, I have a set of twins, they're boy-girl twins, and I have been asked by so many adults if they're identical. And they're boy and girl. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's not possible. And a lot of them don't quite understand, you know, what exactly that they're asking. So, you know, just little instances like that, it's like, I want to make sure that my students know this stuff. So it's pretty simple. I want to increase their literacy.
Well, I do it because when I graded traditionally, I had no clue what I was getting back. I mean, so some kid makes a 40 on your test. What does that mean? Does that mean that they know 40% of the material, or does that mean they just had a bad day, or does that mean they're a bad test taker? What does it mean? I don't think it means anything. And so when I got into the standards-based grading and learning targets, all of a sudden, those numerical numbers, they meant something. Like I can look at a kid who has done an assessment, you know, however they want to do it, orally, written, multiple choice tests, whatever. And I can say, all right, you know that cellular respiration is all about making ATP. I know that you know that. And then we can move forward. So it allows me to like really hone in on what they know and individualize their instruction. It just makes so much more sense to me to measure it this way than to measure it the old way.
I second everything Leslie and Ocean just said. I think this is a much more real world standard of looking at learning. If I take something to my principal right now and it's not up to his par, he's not going to fire me. He's not going to like give me a 0 or whatever. He's going to ask me to go back and redo it. And so I think having an understanding of what mastery looks like and allowing them to have the opportunity to fulfill that for themselves, I think that's really appealing both as a teacher and as a student, because it's super clear as to what mastery looks like, and it's a super clear target for them to aim for every single time, and they can see themselves grow, and that is so impactful.
Awesome.
Oops, sorry, Ben.
No, go ahead, David. I'm sorry.
I was just going to add that I agree with everybody, and I actually got into it as a pilot. Somebody asked if I'd be interested. My administrator at the time asked if I'd be interested in piloting standards-based grading, and I said, "Yeah, I'll try it because I don't think it's going to work." And I was so happy that it did, because the reason I continued to do it and why I love it so much is because it drives the instruction and changes the instruction. And I feel like I would never have gotten to the type of instruction and type of teaching and experiences that my students have if I hadn't switched over to standards-based grading, because I would have been so focused on just, measuring the things that are quick and easy to measure. Grade the quiz. Okay, yep, they got hundreds and 90s and 80s and whatnot on that. And without the switch to standards-based, I wouldn't have gotten to the place I am now in terms of teaching.
That is wonderful. Thank you so much, Dave. I want to give one more chance and give somebody the last word. So if you haven't had a chance to answer about the why, please jump in.
I think for us at Need, everything we do is about preparing students for the real world of work, for them to be, have the requisite skills to be lifelong learners. And the standards-based grading reports give students and parents the information they need to have real agency, to be active participants in their learning, to learn how they learn and that sort of thing, and in a way that traditional systems just don't. So for us, it's about providing all members of our community with the information they need to foster learning.
Wow. So I'm tingling. That was awesome. That was really cool. All of you guys here sharing all these different perspectives, but really kind of honing in on this really important concept, that how important assessment is. I don't know about you, but I can have very few instances that I look back on PD and PLC work where we talked explicitly about assessment. We wanted to talk about it more, but it always was a difficult thing to wrap our heads around. So the fact that you guys are doing it and you're doing it well, and hopefully you're learning a little bit from each other. Hopefully you've been able to hear some things that are new to you, or maybe a different kind of angle on something that you've already been thinking about. So I appreciate so much you guys being here and sharing all of your insights with us and your experiences and your reasons for being here. So I will go ahead and wind us down and let us go. I want to go ahead and thank you right now if we don't get the chance for being here. So we are going to be launching this online community of practice fairly soon. It's hard to say exactly when, so I won't say that. But it will be coming soon, and it will be a place for us to convene and interact with each other and hopefully share resources and share questions and be an active PLC beyond our school walls. So we've got within that a whole host of resources and opportunities to connect that you can kind of take and use as needed. But the main thing is to get folks together around what we're doing with assessment and why and how. So look out for our invitation soon to join us on the Participate platform. We will also have further webinars where we will, the next webinar will be focused on school leaders and systems leaders and their experiences with this assessment experience. And now that you have joined the community by being here, at least today, please keep in touch. If you liked what you heard today, let us know. And of course, we have the bit.ly down there ready for you to give us just a couple of minutes of feedback and let us know what you liked and what you would like to see. And we want to continue getting better for the folks who are engaged with us. We'll also follow up with some insights from today, links to some of the resources that were mentioned, as well as potential opportunities for us to connect further. So last but not least, please give us a little bit of feedback there on the bit.ly down at the bottom of the slide, and you are free to have your day back. Thank you so much for joining us.